Welcome to Canadian Beer Journal. My name is Kevin. For the next couple of reviews, just to help me focus up and commit to a more regular review schedule, I'm going to be looking at a single style of beer. Um, Sort of like I did with the Imperial Stouts a while back. This time I'm going to focus on Oatmeal Stouts, which are becoming slowly a bit more popular. You're starting to see a couple of breweries experiment with them. It is an older style that's been revived probably in the 1980s is when you started to see them come out. But there's some newer entrants into the field that I want to take a look at. We're going to be starting off with the Celebrated, and it says the Celebrated Oatmeal Stout from Samuel Smith's. Much like with the Imperial Stouts, that's a great place to start because this was one of the first beers to really revive the style, in the sense that it uses a large enough proportion of oats to really, I'd say, count as a distinct style of beer. Next, we're going to move to the Trafalgar Smoked Oatmeal Stout. This beer has recently been repackaged. This beer is sweating pretty good. I'm using a new beer fridge system. I might have it down a bit too cold because I just noticed that these beers are really sweating now that I've taken them out. Anyhow, this has recently been repackaged. It used to come in the 650 ml bombers with a different label on it. Now it's down to the 500 ml, sort of like a big stubby neck sort of deal. Um, Curious to see if that's any different from the version that I had before. I've had it a couple of times. We're going to finish off with this, the Great Divide Oatmeal Yeti. This is an Imperial Stout. It's sort of a variation on a beer that they regularly do. And this one actually has a small proportion of raisins in the mash as well, so that could be very, very interesting. If I'm able to, either between this review and the Trafalgar, or between the Trafalgar and the Yeti, I'm going to see if I can pick up a 6-pack of the Saint Bois Oatmeal Stout from McCausland Brewing. That can be a little bit tricky to get sometimes, because the beer store doesn't tend to restock it very often, and not all of the LCBOs carry multi-packs. So I'll see if I can get my hands on it, just for another Canadian beer to throw into the mix. And yeah, so let's get started. Uh, a note on the style, I think there's a bit of a debate as to whether or not an oatmeal stout is a distinct style. If you look on Beer Advocate, for instance, they have it listed as a separate thing, but Rate Beer does not. If you were to look at the same beer, you would see one listed as a stout on Rate Beer and it listed as an oatmeal stout on Beer Advocate. And I think that's partially to do with the fact that there's not a great deal of control on what qualifies as an oatmeal stout. For example, what proportion of oats, um, the kind of oats being put into it. So they all say oatmeal stout, but not all of them actually use oatmeal. Some of them might use flaked oats, or in this case, they're calling it smoked oatmeal malt, which to me sounds a little bit different from just throwing in oatmeal into the mash. And that can affect the flavor in different ways. But out of the oat stouts that I've had, where oat was a featured ingredient, they do have a certain commonality in the sense they're a little bit lighter than their all malt counterparts, and they tend to have a little bit of that sweetness in them. So we'll see if that holds out over the next couple of reviews. Um, we're going to start, as I said, with the Sam Smiths here. This is available in the LCBO. I think it's about $4, $4, 4.50, something like that. Comes in the standard Sam Smith 550 ml bottle. Has the kind of champagne bottle foil on there, which I'm not crazy about, but whatever. Adds a little bit more drama, I guess, to the beer. You have the old school style label, as you do with a lot of Samuel Smith products, but on the back you have a bit more modern styling there. It tells you a little bit about the beer. What it doesn't tell you here is that in addition to, so it is obviously has some barley in it, as well as the oatmeal, but what it will tell you on the website is they also use cane sugar in the production of this beer. Um, to me, I don't necessarily think it's a big deal to add sugar into your beer. I just tend to like to know beforehand. Uh, I don't see a date per se on this bottle. We got a date code there. So let me see if I can clean it up a bit. Okay, so these bottles were really sweating. Um, I mean, the problem with the date code is just that unless you happen to have a smartphone out with access to the internet at the time, it doesn't do you much good before you purchase the product. I mean, yeah, I can look this up on the internet when I get home and find out that my bottle's 2 weeks out of date. Um, just put the date on the beer. I know that there's a bit of an issue of contention. A lot of people say, well, that adversely affects small production producers. At the end of the day, you're producing a product that is being sold for human consumption. You couldn't put something in a grocery store without a dating on it. So, in my opinion, yes, I understand that puts a proportionately higher burden on small producers, but if you're going to produce something that needs to be fit for human consumption, you have a duty to make sure that you can actually deliver that. Anyhow, rant over. This was first produced in 1980. I think it uses about 30% oatmeal in it, so it's a fairly high proportion of oatmeal. Um, I haven't been able to find out what the IBU is on it. It is 5% alcohol, which for a British beer would be considered a sort of full strength product. But I guess by the standards of sort of more modern stouts, it's a little bit tamer. But alright, I'm gonna see if I can cut this foil off without getting it all in the beer. Alright, there we go. Hopefully it stays out of the glass here. Nice amount of smoke. Alrighty. Got a huge head on there. That's what, three, maybe four fingers, four of my fingers. My fingers are kind of slim. Problem with these longer neck bottles with the sort of sharp curve here, it's hard to pour it cleanly, but you know, I guess you get used to it. Anyhow, you're getting a little bit of light coming through the glass, small ruby tinge. Got an off-white head there, fairly large bubbles, as you can see. Sticking around fairly well considering how aggressively I poured it. Normally you get this big puffy head and it goes right back down, but this one's staying around. Hard to tell if the beer is extremely viscous just looking at it. Alright, let's get a nose on it. First off, I'm getting a bready kind of note. And it's sort of a sweet bread, kind of think like a French loaf kind of bread. Followed by a bit of a coffee note, sort of a coffee ground note, not like a, say, milked coffee or something like that. A bit of the yeastiness in there. A little bit of a sweet note, but it's kind of hard to tell what exactly it is. Definitely a bit of a ground coffee note, in the nose at least. Alright, let's take a sip. Cheers. So definitely, it's much lighter than even an equivalent dry stout. Something like Guinness is definitely a lot thicker on the palate. But at the same time, it's not quite a porter. Say something like Fuller's London Porter definitely comes off as more sweet and a little bit lighter than this. So this is an interesting in between there. It does have a bit of a bitterness in the background, a tiny bit of a hop hint, and definitely finishes dry, but there is a fair amount of sweetness mid-palate. And what it ends up coming off as is a sort of fruity, um, almost like not quite a jammy note, but sort of like a dried fruit, maybe a bit of a fig note. I'm going to let this warm up because I think right now these beers are really cold. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to warm up, see if it opens up any more flavors. See you then. Bye. Welcome back. So I've been sipping on this for a couple of minutes, letting it try to get up to, I guess, more traditional British drinking temperatures. And I'm getting a lot more of the sweetness as it opens up, and also a little bit more of a distinct hop note in the background. There's definitely more coffee now on the nose, and sort of through the taste of the beers, that sweetness kind of melds into the bitterness a bit. Definitely a lot sweeter than when it started. It reminds me, this particular beer, of a milk stout in some ways. Say the Bose Tom Green beer that just recently came out. Excellent beer, by the way. If you see it, pick it up. It's about $5, I think, for a 600 ml bottle. Um, I'm not getting a real chocolatiness. I know some other people have stated that they get a really distinct sort of a dark chocolate and vanilla note. Um, I recently had a bottle of the Young's Double Chocolate Stout, and this uh, sort of in a reasonably close proximity just doesn't give me that kind of chocolate note specifically. What I'm getting is definitely some coffee, a little bit of hop bitterness, sort of a, again, more traditionally English medicinal hop bite rather than a citrus or a pine. A bit of that fruitiness I was talking about earlier, sort of a fig, um, and definitely a sweetness overall coming from the oats, because it's not quite a malt sweetness. Like, you can definitely tell that there's something else going on there, and that's definitely the influence of the oats, in my opinion. And it makes for a really great drinking experience, because if you're used to something like a Guinness, and maybe you're not into the sweeter, more flavored stouts, but you're looking for something either a little bit lighter or just a little bit different, this is definitely a great beer to try. It is a little bit lighter than I expected it to be. Um, to be totally honest, I thought it would be a bit thicker, maybe a bit more sort of in your face with the roasted notes. Uh, but what they've produced here is definitely a much more sessionable, um, sort of drinkable beer. And this would definitely pair well, I think, with something else like, say, a beef stew or an equivalently hearty dish. So overall, definitely worth picking up. If you see it in the LCBO, I'd grab it. Next time, I think we're going to be reviewing the Trafalgar Smoked Oatmeal Stout, which should be going in the complete opposite direction. I know that beer can be a little bit woolly with the roasted notes, so that'll definitely be a big change up. But if I can score a six-pack of the McCausland in time, I might be reviewing that instead. And I know that one is, I think, about 40 IBUs, so again, definitely probably going to be a bit more intense than this one was. So until next time.